Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm Daniel Torres, your host. If this is the first time you tune in, you'll want to know that this is the show that gives visibility to the top voices in consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond. And we've been doing so since the very far 2020. We're now actually well over 200 episodes in. So thanks all for your support, and do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and be educated with some of the industry's top voices. And remember, we are also part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by no other than the CPG guys in the US. So do go into the show where Peter and Sri have guests from the US, and they speak twice a week with leaders over there, especially about e-commerce and retail media. And this is not me alone here. I have two amazing co-hosts, and I'm accompanied today by one of them, and it's no other than Christina Nicolaou, all the way from Athens. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing very well. Excited to record what's probably the last episode of the year.
The last recording of the year and one of the first releases of 2025. So, yeah, very exciting. What are your plans for New Year's Eve?
Nothing too fancy. Just we will be at a restaurant with my husband and my sisters, which I'm very excited about.
You have two sisters, right? I've met one of them. I forget you have two sometimes.
You've met the one in Barcelona who lives there.
Exactly.
And yes,
exactly.
I have one even younger one.
Who lives in Athens, right?
Who lives in Athens currently, yes.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I'm going to spend it here in a town in the Costa Brava, a couple of hours from Barcelona. So nothing fancy, but yes, entertaining and a good party. So I won't be going to bed very early on the 31st. It will be way in...
Expectations, Daniel. Well done.
Yeah, no. My expectation is to go to bed at some point. Anyway, so going back to business, today we're going to talk about a topic that we actually spoke about recently, Christina, and I think we're both very passionate about and curious about, I would say, to an extent, which is company culture, right?
Uh-huh.
So what are your thoughts on it? I mean, why do you think it's an interesting topic?
You know, I'm in strategy, and I keep hearing a lot these days that culture is strategy for breakfast. It seems something like a phrase that people keep on repeating. And I think it actually is very, very true. And it's only a few companies that have managed to really create this kind of culture where people want to stay there and they want to give their best selves every day and feel energized when they're waking up and going to work.
Yeah. And one company that I've heard a lot about their culture, and I've heard about their culture, I think that even before I started working. So I'd heard about their culture for a long time and how it's unique, is WL Gore, which is, you'll probably all know for GORE-TEX, which you'll find in a lot of apparel products, a very high-end technology that insulates basically clothes. So today we're accompanied by one of their associates, which is no other than Ralf Miculcy, who's joining us from Germany. Hey, Ralf, how are you?
Daniel, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be part of the podcast and to speak about what I'm so passionate about for the company and the work I'm doing.
Yes, so first of all, I'm very happy as well that you've joined us. It's been by the way, sorry if you hear a motorbike in the background, things that happen in the countryside. But very happy that you've joined us, Ralf, because you and me have been in touch for a number of years, and we talked about having you and talking about this topic that we're so passionate about. But first of all, let me ask you, how are you going to celebrate your New Year's?
So we have a tradition. We always celebrate with friends. We always mix one time at our house, next time on their house, and we're just going to have a good fondue probably. Drinking some good wine and celebrating into New Year.
And is it your house or their house this time? Who's going to do the cleaning?
This time it's their house, so it's easy for us. Nothing required, no preparation.
Fantastic. And you're based in Munich, right?
I'm based there in Rosenheim, which is close to Munich.
Yeah. So Ralf, I mentioned a bit about WL Gore or Gore, which is, their flagship product is GORE-TEX. But can you tell us a bit more about the company, since, this podcast is FMCG, retail, which you're kind of part of, but maybe you're not the best known company, but we'd like to hear more about it.
I'm more than happy to share more about Gore, but maybe it might be good to start at the beginning, because I think even the founding story is pretty impressive. So Gore was founded by Bill and Viv Gore in 1958. And at that point of time, both have been 45 years old. They had already 5 kids. And they started the company basically in the basement. And what I find very impressive is when they did start their company, basically they put all eggs into the basket, right? They risked even their life savings, let's call it kind of that, right? Because they did just put in everything they had to pursue their dreams and found a company. Though they did start the company basically with a cable business in their garage, and then the company did grow. Roughly 12 years later, their son, Bob Gore, he discovered how you could expand PTSD, which then did become ePTSD at the end of the day, and which did provide a lot of opportunities and for applications across many industries. So if you just take a look right now, Gore is roughly in 15 industries. So we are serving products to 15 different industries, from medical to mobile electronics to aerospace to automotive to industrial products to textiles and consumer products, and just to name a few, many more, of course. Globally, we are roughly 13,000 associates. And Gore is the largest privately held company in the US.
Wow, impressive, and very much an innovation company at its core, the way that I hear you speak about it. And Ralf, you've been with Gore for quite a long time, and you've had like a very long career journey throughout these years. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your career path?
More than happy to do so. So my career, as you can imagine, I did start in 1996. It's been significantly shaped by WL Gore and Associates. So when I first joined, 96, my intention was only to stay for 1 year. And as you can see, I'm still part of the family. And I have been pretty lucky to work for such kind of an amazing company. But let me start probably where I did start with my journey. So basically, I did start in logistics. And I was hired to support and help the implementation of the first fully automated warehouse, which was installed at Gore. And my job was basically to partner with the software house to develop the specifications, the processes, and to create a manual. So this was my starting point. And from that kind of starting point, commitments pretty fast did become bigger and did evolve. So I moved then into supply chain, then end supply chain, and from there to commercial roles. The beauty I had was that I could change commitments, or at least significantly add commitments all 4 to 5 years, which did help me develop and grow. Over the past 5 years, I had the exciting and probably also most challenging opportunity of my career to lead the transformation of Gore from a traditional wholesale model to a consumer-centric and digital-led business or brand. And during this time, we evolved basically and probably all the product offering, as well as also the marketing and sales strategies, and we modernized the brands. And since the last couple of months, I'm part of a team which is mainly focused around future. So future business model, everything Horizon 3, basically, which is part of the fabrics business within Gore. And this allows me to contribute strongly, but also allows me to really continue my learning opportunities. And probably one thing, just reflecting on the last 15 years, that's probably pretty interesting just to add. I think I was lucky having had in the first 15 years always leaders at the start of my career, right, who really believed in me and who provided me a lot of opportunities to grow and challenge. And that's probably also part of the Gore culture, and I can speak to that later. But those kind of leaders often presented me with opportunities I had sometimes no clue about, but they always said, you will figure it out. And finally I did.
And I think that's worth noting as well, Ralf, when you were managing Goreware, that Gore is very well known, as you mentioned, as a company that's in a lot of industries, medical, mobile, automobile, where you're selling your technology, but you were actually managing a direct, more like a retail business or a product-led business, right? Where you're selling your own brand of products, so to speak, which I think is interesting and relevant to the topics that we talk here.
Absolutely, yeah.
What did that business look like? As in, just interested to know, in contrast with the main B2B business, how did the kind of like spin-off of a brand product come up?
I think the spin-off did start already very early. It was 1984 for Gore. And over here, probably a pretty interesting story. A couple of associates, I think it was 3 associates, they had the desire they both, all 3 have been passionate cyclists, and they believed that they could solve a problem with the GORE-TEX material for the cyclists, right? To protect from the cold and from the rain. So they tried to sell this kind of, let's say, material to brands at that point of time, but none of the brands have been really interested because they believed they couldn't really sell a jacket for 200 Deutschmark at that point of time. So at that point of time, they basically did decide and they did do it on their own. So they developed the first jacket. Then they went again to retail, but none of the retailers really had any interest to purchase the jackets because they still also believed it's not possible. And at the last retailer, they just left 10 jackets and they say, okay, keep it. Maybe you can sell it. If not, then you return it. And interesting enough, the retailer called back within a week and they say, hey, I'm sold out. I need more jackets. And this was the founding story of Gore at the end of the day. We always called ourselves forward integrated business, so we are vertical business, right? Obviously, we have complete different skills and different, let's say, capabilities to own compared to a traditional B2B business model. And this did probably also evolve significantly throughout the transition, moving from a traditional wholesale and even to a consumer business model, which is digital led. And everything starts with data, really making sure you understand what does resonate, what does work, what doesn't work. And also probably, and of course, running an own direct-to-consumer business as a consequence out of that.
Yeah.
I love what's saying in this story, that it starts with, here's a problem that we found and we wanted to solve. And this is like really the essence of what consumer-centric is, right? And I guess like we don't really get to have these kind of conversations a lot of times when it comes to really big companies with the complex processes and the way these brands are set up. But really, this is kind of like the startup mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset of, here's a problem, I'd say, here's how I feel like I can fix it, and I will just go for it and push and go, do all the hustling that's needed to make it happen. So I really love this story.
And then probably also to add what you're saying, because you're absolutely right. I think Gore is perceived as a product leadership company, and we see ourselves as a product leadership company. And probably also one thing which did really also help me in my thinking throughout my career was our founders always did put in front of them the fitness for use principle. So in the fitness for use principle basically states we have to make sure that our products do what they say they do. It's a pretty, let's say, strong sentence, but also very simplistic, but it does do a lot to all of us as associates, right? Because we really have to make sure that we deliver on our promise, and the team, more than Gore, all associates are committed to do so.
And I was just thinking when you said 200 Deutschmarks, which I think is the equivalent of 100 euros now, if they saw like the prices that some jackets go for these days, inflation included, they would find it hard to believe, I think.
Absolutely. But the beauty with Gore products is also, especially now speaking about Goreware and let's say the fabrics division, when it comes to consumer products, I think the durability is extreme, right? You have those kind of products for a very, very long time, and you will be proud of those kind of products, and they will always perform.
Yeah, and at the end, these things that may seem expensive are not so expensive. No, that there's this saying in Spanish, actually, that's the lo barato sale caro, which basically means cheap things end up being expensive because they don't basically last long, or they're like a shortcut. So there you go.
I always have the saying, value is determined by, when you think about garments, maybe also for other products, but the value is determined by how often are you going to use it and how long are you owning it. So therefore, it's always, if you put that in context, it helps to determine the value and the price.
Yeah. And I think something that is interesting about your profile, Ralf, is the fact that you were in operations and supply chain for a long time, and then you switched to commercial. What was the working of that? What was your thinking, and how did you adapt from one function to another that it seems so different?
Yeah, and it is different, but it isn't on the other side, right? Because when I was working in supply chain, that's also what the entire supply chain team still is doing. We always have been closely connected to the product team, to the sales team, to really understand what are the customer and consumer needs, and what do we have to do as a supply chain team to support that, right? And to also deliver on our, let's say, strategies. So therefore, the key switch for me was probably curiosity, because as more as you connect with those kind of teams, as more as you learn. And then I always had the desire to keep learning and growing. I also had the interest or the aspiration to move later in my career to more of a general management commitment. And back in 2010, actually, there was the first opportunity. There was a category leadership commitment opening for the cycling business. I'm a super passionate cyclist. I know the industry quite well. So I applied for the commitment. At that point of time, my interim leader, he was supportive, and he was at that point of time the business leader, but his leader was not supportive. So at the end, I didn't get the commitment. And at the beginning, I was disappointed, but then my leader's leader was coming from the US. And he asked me for a meeting. So I went into the meeting room, and he took me out for a long walk, which is still on my mind, but it also speaks probably a little bit to the culture. So we had a long walk through the forest and nice chat. But his advice was as simple, but also as impactful for me. So he basically did say, hey, you have to make sure you round up your profile. Furthermore, you learn more things, you gain or gather new experiences to prepare for yourself for the commitments which might lie ahead for you. And this did really shape also my development plan and going forward. So my learning from that was, or reflecting back, was that career is not always straight, right? Sometimes you have to do a side street. Sometimes you have to take an alley in order to prepare yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's in the Lenin book that said that career is not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. And it's something that completely resonates with me as well. Actually, my first role in Procter & Gamble was in supply chain. That's where I started as well. And at the beginning, I was always thinking like I have to somehow justify in interviews, the different changes I've made in my career. But now it feels more like the diverse kind of like background is more of a superpower. I actually feel like I have a much better understanding now doing strategy because I have actually gone through supply chain. I'm wondering, how has this been for you, Ralf? Do you find the experience of having like this part of the background as an advantage in the way that you are working with commercial?
Like, Christine, what you're saying, I think it's also resonating with me. I found it, and I still find it, very valuable because I think it provides you a more holistic view how everything is connected and how everything needs to be orchestrated, especially in today's world, right? If you want to launch a product market, everything is sequenced, everything has to be fast, you have to do things right, and therefore you have to understand all the elements, that everything is orchestrated at the end of the day, and then it will also ultimately work. I also had the great opportunity of seeing a lot of factories. So it's really seeing how garments, also glass and other products are being made. And this is just an enriching experience, which is helping you, I think, throughout your entire life. And probably the one thing which helped me most is in my current commitment, I think it helps also to bridge the gap between strategy and execution. I think that's also what you probably mentioned, right? You know what you have to do to bring it to life. And that's pretty important. So I have high appreciation for my starting point.
If you look back now that it's been a few years, you did the general management role as well. What do you think are like the key learnings that you had in this transition?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's probably a tough question because it might depend on where you are in your journey as an associate or employee in other companies, right? And I had so many learnings, but probably I would put it down to two key learnings I had. So the one is probably surround yourself with a very diverse team, and ensure that this team is going to tell you the truth. And I'm going to explain probably a little bit why I'm, let's say, recommending this as my key learning. I had the greatest privilege to work for 25 years in very diverse teams, for global teams. I had the opportunity to have extended stays in the US, but also in Hong Kong and China. And what you learn through that is working in different cultures, navigating in different cultures, right? But the biggest beauty is probably also you learn a lot about different thoughts and perspectives, which just make your strategy or everything you're working on better, but also obviously developing you as a human being strongly. So you're significantly influenced by that. The other thing is when we think about that the team should tell you the truth, you have to enable that. And in GORE, we have a very strong feedback culture. It's basically based on a principle we call SBI. So if you want to give feedback, you would describe what is the situation, what has been the behavior of the one you want to give the feedback to, right? And what has been the impact on you. And this always goes usually pretty well. And we always encouraging our team. So I did encourage my team to do that and be very open. And what it does two things. The one thing is if your entire team shares their feedback with you, whether you like it or not, it gives you a perspective on where they are, what they are excited about, what they worry, right? But on the other side, I think it gives you also the opportunity to reflect on that and say, okay, where do I have to be even more clear? Where do I have to communicate better? And sometimes even you might say, hey, where did I hurt feelings? And you might even apologize. And I think this is very, very important because what it does do is it gives everyone on the team the feeling being heard and being valued. And this is, for me, very essential. Even when I'm saying that, I get goosebumps because it's so important.
Yeah.
And the other thing is probably what I learned is, for me, I had to master my daily climb. I think we all have our daily climbs, right? You have work, you have family, you have your private commitments and interests, and you have to bring everything into a balance, or however the balance looks like, basically. And the one thing is, in order to progress in your career, you have to be curious, what I mentioned in the beginning, and you have to have a learning mindset. And I think that today's world where we are living in, it's so easy to access perspectives, knowledge. You can listen to podcasts, you can watch YouTube documentaries, or also podcasts, you can read books, you can chat with ChatGPT. So there are so many opportunities, and you have to maximize the time you have, because it's your choice whether you watch a Netflix series or whether you listen to a different perspective, which is just helping you to build over time. And the other thing is probably also you have to worry about recharging yourself, because as you take on broader responsibilities, the demands on you will increase. At least this is what I have experienced. And therefore, it was always super important for me, because it's easy to say, okay, I'm working from day to night. But you have to find your moments where you say, okay, I do my exercise, I spend time with my loved ones, as well as also I take care for what I'm eating. So my advice for this area is build your routine and make sure you will be very consistent in what you're doing.
What does your routine look like?
Depends a little bit, and some of my friends say I'm a little bit crazy because I have a pretty strong routine. It depends on winter and summer. So right now, as mainly it is dark in Germany, right? At least on the non-working hours. So I get up in the morning, toothbrushing, obviously, drink my structured glass of water, then I exercise, then I get red light, and then I prepare my food, then I go for a shower, cold shower included, and then I drive to work. And usually I'm commuting roughly 45 minutes. I'm always listening in the morning to a podcast. And then I'm ready to work. When I go home, I'm not listening to podcasts, mainly music to switch off. And then, have dinner with my wife. And then finally doing some yoga or stretching before we go to bed. That's my routine. In summer, it looks a little bit differently. Summer, I get up 5 a.m. and I ride my bike for the first hours of the day. That's what I love to do.
Hours of the day.
5 a.m. club, essentially.
Exactly.
Super productivity. And I love all the things that you mentioned, Ralf, that, your career has been with Gore, and it feels like you have been enabled also to follow all these parts that you were mentioning. And you did tell us a little bit about Gore from the product perspective, but tell us a little bit about it as a business as well, and how it's structured, how you guys work, what you do.
And it's an interesting question, because Gore, so we work basically in a lattice communication structure, which basically means we have no direct chain of communication. So you can imagine that like that. If I would like to talk to our CEO or someone else, the CEO would make himself available to speak to you. Obviously, we all know he's a super busy guy, and you should have a good reason to talk to him. But if you want to, and if you have the desire, he will make time. And this is relevant for the entire enterprise. And this is probably how we work. As you probably also know, we are working in a very strong culture. Maybe I can speak a little bit to the culture, because it's so important. When Bill Gore and we started the business, they believed right from the beginning in the human capacity and in the individual. And they understood clearly from the beginning that in order to create the right work environment, it will be important for their associates to develop and grow, but obviously also to the success of the enterprise. And they did implement 4 principles basically as part of our culture, and they are called freedom, fairness, commitment, and waterline. And those kind of 4 principles are rooted on integrity. And this is basically how we also work and how we behave as associates. When you think about freedom, and maybe I can give you a little bit of example, because, for instance, freedom does not mean what we probably initially would believe it means. It doesn't mean you can do whatever you like to do. Freedom stands more for you have the freedom to develop and grow. But at the same point of time, it does also say you should or you have to support others to grow and develop. And that's probably also, let's say, a good example I had, because I was working with a colleague of mine, and at that point of time was also my mentor on a very important project. And we had to present to our top leadership team. So I had to fly to the US, and we knew that 50% of the group was for it and 50% was completely against it. So it was kind of a delicate situation. So I went into his office and said, "Hey, I'm here afternoon after the presentation." And he did say, "Okay, let's practice." And I wasn't used at that point of time. It's 15 years ago. I was not really used to practice right with someone else. I could do it for myself, but then we did practice. So we did practice every single detail to make sure everything is at least discovered. Let's call it that way. Yeah? Around lunch, the door opened, and one of the leaders we had to present to was coming in. And he was basically saying what we are doing. And we did say, we prepare for the meeting, and we asked a little bit. And he did say, "Hey, don't worry. It's only associates speaking to associates. And if something goes wrong, I will back you up." As you can imagine, this is still after 15 years. It was a small moment in my career, but still resonating. And again, I get goosebumps speaking even about it, because he just gave us a safe environment to present. And when I was flying home, I also realized this, the second thing, I realized that my mentor and my colleague, he did not test or prepare for the presentation because of him. He mainly did do it because of me, but he never gave me the feeling that he was doing it because of me. And this is also probably part of the culture. And this is probably also part what freedom means, really enabling others to grow and succeed too.
Yeah.
I just very quickly reflecting on the freedom we have done, right? And fairness. Fairness stands mainly for inclusiveness. So being really inclusive within the enterprise, but also outside of the enterprise, and also striving to be fair with each other, whether it's within Gore, but also outside of Gore with our business partners. We are all about long-term relationships, and also about win-win situations, not win-lose situations. That's probably also very important. Then we have the commitment I mentioned at the beginning, right? That's probably also pretty interesting. Commitment has a very high meaning in German, we would say Verpflichtung, which is pretty strong, which basically means we are committed to deliver what we commit, right? And it's even going beyond, because even as associates, we hold each other accountable to deliver on our commitments. And then we have the waterline. Waterline is also probably pretty easy to explain. The enterprise is encouraging us as shareholders of the company to make decisions. But as you can imagine, some decisions are probably having a larger impact on the enterprise, some smaller. And if you imagine this like kind of a boat, and if you would see the decisions like a hole in the boat, you can make decisions which put probably a hole in the boat above the sea level, above the waterline, right? But once you get closer to the waterline of the boat, the sea level, you have to consult with the appropriate associates within the company to make sure you're not harming the enterprise. And then those are basically the 4 principles which I mentioned. So freedom, fairness, commitment, and waterline. And they're guiding our decisions and the way we work together.
I mean, this is like, that's the thing, like Gore, I think, is famous for like being an example of really like a non-hierarchical way of, and a horizontal way of managing the companies. And I think it's just fascinating. How do you think the company has managed to stay true to its values and this like very unique horizontal leadership culture over time? Also thinking of like, you've been growing in this period and obviously bringing external talent in. How is it difficult for people to adapt, or how do you do it in general?
It's a long-winded question. Probably like I could give you a long-winded answer for that question.
It was like 5 questions in one. Sorry.
No, I think it's a very great question, because culture also evolves over time. But before I probably speak about the evolvement of culture, going back to the founding story, right? The company was founded in 1958. At that point of time, our founders already believed, as I mentioned, to put the right culture in place in order to succeed as an enterprise. It was 1958. This is always what I find very mind-blowing, because at that point of time, probably most of the organization worked a little bit differently. Nowadays, it's more and more companies are going that kind of direction, right? Similar, not same, but similar, because they know how important it is for associates to create an impact and what kind of environment they have to find in order to do so. But why I'm saying that is, so the culture is in place since more than 65 years, right? It's evolving, but we have 13,000 associates. If you just remember what I did say when sharing about the principles, as associates, everyone is making sure we are living up to our values and our principles. So we hold each other also accountable to deliver on our culture, which is probably also important. And our culture is probably most apparent when you see us working together, but also working with our partners, because we also do get the feedback from our customers and partners within the entire value chain that working with us is quite often differently from what they are used to, because it's all about collaboration, it's about partnership and so on. And then probably what is also very important, and not to forget, our CEO, obviously, right, and his top leadership team, they are committed to emphasize on the importance of our culture. They launch regularly training programs. New associates go through right in the beginning, but also experienced associates will get updates and can continue to learn on the culture. And then obviously we have also culture champions within the company who are embracing on the culture and helping others to understand, right? And even sometimes with like myself giving examples to really make sure that they understand what does it actually mean, what the culture is based on, how do we live.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Ralf, I'm wondering, when you have new associates coming in, I mean, of course, they will go through all the training and trying to understand the culture. Do you see them struggling? Because that's what Gore has, seems to be kind of like unique. The culture being there for 65 years, as you mentioned, compared to other companies where you still have like, okay, they're getting more flatties, they're trying to be more agile, but in essence, you still have like this kind of hierarchical way of, being structured, and the way that you're also communicating compared to kind of like the flat communication chain that you mentioned. So do you see people struggling when they're coming in?
Yeah, I mentioned, let me just give you probably a little bit of a longer answer. I try still to make it short, but when they come in, first of all, every associate it's a starting sponsor. So every associate in the company, more than 13,000, have a sponsor.
Okay.
And the starting sponsor is determined at the beginning, and it is an associate where we believe he or he can help the new associate with the onboarding experience the fastest, right? So really bringing into the teams, helping to understand the environment, the structure, the culture, and everything. So this is already probably the first moment. What I did realize that most of the new associates really appreciate that kind of culture because it's different. It's about collaboration. It's about partnership. It's very open. You see a lot of appreciation from and within the teams. And it's not really that someone is there telling you what you have to do. That's probably at the beginning for some a little bit of a I don't want to say challenge, but it's not easy. You have to probably figure out how to contribute the most. One element, which is probably very important also, is the P&D. So we have a performance and development plan, as every other company also has, but there's one uniqueness coming to it. And the uniqueness is that the draft of the performance and development plan is not developed from the leader. It's mainly coming from the associate. And what it does make sure that the associate really understands the team priorities and the business priorities, which are set from the leader, obviously, right? So you then think about, okay, I'm in my commitment. Those are the team performance goals. Those are the business performance goals. And how can I contribute to those kind of, let's say, criteria? And then you go to your leader and then you discuss it with your leader, obviously. And your leader might either challenge you to be bolder or challenge you to soften it a little because it's probably unrealistic what you did put in place. And then you're going through a circle to continuously review and align on what's happening throughout the year. But what is also very important is the development. So we also encourage associates to really take care for the development piece. To really consider what kind of skills or learning experience or trainings they would like to have gained throughout the next 12 years, which will help them to develop and grow. Now, coming back to your question, for some it might be a challenge at the beginning, right? Because it's something differently, especially if you come from a hierarchical company and you're used to it, and if you appreciate it, it's not easy. But most of the associates really fall in love with the culture because it's just completely differently. And also, I think we as associates are committed to really help everyone throughout that kind of journey. Did that answer your question? Not sure. I was probably a long-winded answer.
It did, Ralf. Thank you.
And along these lines, like when somebody joins a company, they really want to know how to like progress. And one may think like in a horizontal hierarchy, like how am I gonna like become more senior and grow? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's so P&D is very important, right? Understand what kind of commitment you are currently in, or you're hired for, you move towards to what is expected from you and deliver on that. I think this is the most important thing, first of all. And then probably let's say there's no career path which is always the same. It might always a little bit differently, but it comes down to the same. So from my point of view, it is always to make sure that you can contribute on the most important elements of the business. So create an impact for the enterprise, the success of the enterprise. And the way I view it, and this was probably also part of my career, I always made sure that I delivered on my core commitment, and I had always a little bit of a spare time. And I invested this kind of spare time and offered myself to my leader or to other leaders to help and learn. So I had the opportunity, I could learn and expose myself to topics I had no clue about. And I contributed at the same point of time. And this is usually because if you do that, you will be recognized, you will be seen. And if you do it well, as a consequence, you will be offered new opportunities throughout your career. And this is how at least my career did work. It might work for others. From a basic principle, the same. They just might apply different methodologies.
And Ralf, at the beginning, you said you were going to go for a year, right? And then you're still there. I'm wondering, why do you feel like people get to stay in this company, and what kind of like role does this culture play?
I think probably culture, number one. Why is it culture? Because it is, and again, probably as I mentioned, you will see that if you see us working together as well as us working with our partners, there's so much appreciation, so much collaboration, so much inclusiveness. GORE is also a very global culture. So most of my time I did work with teams around the globe, but it's just enriching, right? I could not any longer work in a company probably which is just locally, because it's you will miss a piece of life probably. And again, as I mentioned, it's not just for your professional experience, but also for your personal development and your developing as a human being, basically. So it's the culture, very important to me. The other thing is probably also, if you just take a look to the purpose of the enterprise, the purpose is well set from my point of view. The purpose is together improving life. If you take a look across the industries, what kind of applications GORE is delivering, it is really that it's driving resonance with most of the associates. And most of the associates, as they can contribute so strongly, are also super proud of what they do and the products they basically sell or create or whatever they do, right? This is probably also, I think, super, super important for associates to remain with the company, not to pursue different pathways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably the thing as well that the products that you're doing don't only serve one end, but there's actually a lot of different businesses within one that I think is probably very interesting as well, and something to maybe discuss another day, maybe in a part two, Ralf. But I wanted to ask you our famous last question, which is, with everything that you've learned in your career, if you had to go back to yourself as you were starting, what would be that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
And I give two pieces of advice.
Yeah,
you can. Probably two.
You're not the first one who skips the rules, so I'll have to let you as well.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me doing that. So the first one is pretty easy. Follow your passion, not the money. And the reason that I'm saying that is, if you follow your passion, everything gets so easy. You will have to learn a lot, right? I had to learn a lot. Everyone has to learn a lot if you want to progress in your career. But if you're passionate about what you do, it just feels so easy. It doesn't feel like work. If you don't do that, if you follow basically the money, you will realize at a certain point of time in your life, and most of the times around 50, that your passion is still somewhere there and is pulling you. But then changing is not as easy because you have your liabilities, you have a family, right? You have to pay college, whatever you have to do. So then it gets harder. You can still do it, but it's really hard. The other advice, thank you for the second one. The second one is a pretty easy: invest in yourself. And what I mean by that is, if you want to learn. If you need to invest into a seminar and your employer doesn't pay for it, GORE always have been I have been fortunate that GORE paid for many of my development activities. But even if you are not having such kind of a company you work for, pay for yourself, because it's an investment, it's not a spending. It will pay off over time.
This was Ralf Miculcy from GORE. Christina, what are your key takeaways from the conversation?
Okay, first of all, it was very interesting to me that we got someone to speak with such passion about the culture of a company, and that the company, which is in a very random, let's say, part of the industry, they are so well known for their culture. And I felt from all the conversation we had with Ralf that this is rooted to the core way they operate with regards to the consumer, right? Because they all started with, how do I solve a problem? Here is the problem I have. Here's how I'm going to solve it. And I feel like this is where good company culture starts.
I liked also the origin of the company, founded in 1958 by 45-year-olds, which kind of thing, I like to do a lot of things. So it makes me think, well, I can still do a lot of things with my life if I want to, no?
Yes, of course. Of course, you can start a company that goes into 15 industries and gets 30,000 associates.
Largest privately held company in the US, which is amazing.
Yeah. And, but yes, indeed. So one of the principles that Ralf was mentioning, and again, going back into how this company was founded in that basement, was the fitness for use principle that they have, which means that their product needs to do what they say they do. We started with a problem to solve, and then we create a problem that actually does what it says it does. And I love this part. But then I think most importantly, in the overall conversation, the 4 overarching points he was mentioning for the company, which is they operate in a state of freedom, fairness, commitment, and then the waterline part. What did you think of that?
Remind me, what was that again?
This is what he was saying, that we give people freedom to make choices, because if you are on a boat, if you make a wrong choice, a wrong decision, and it creates a hole on the boat, as long as it's above the water line, it's not going to impact the business. It give a lot more agency. They give a lot of more agency to their associates in order to be able to take those decisions that are above water line.
Yeah, and I think it's really an example that's talked about, but not that much of a really flat structure that's actually functional. But I think that a lot of times we associate flat hierarchies with very small companies or experimental or something very with a certain ideology behind it. But this shows that not necessarily and just an example, he said he can speak with his CEO whenever he likes, which is crazy in a lot of companies to think that can actually happen.
And look, Ralf is a very senior person, right? But when we're speaking with him before the podcast and we're like, tell us how we need to address you, what's your title? And he was telling us, I'm an associate. At the end of the day, we're just associates speaking to other associates, and this is how we treat each other. So I guess it's very unique in a way. I'm not sure that it would work everywhere, because of inherent people behaviors and the current status quo in the FMCG industry structures. But it's quite refreshing to hear, I guess, and see it work so well within 30,000 people. That's tough to do.
Yeah, I feel like I would want to work there for a month to see how it actually works, to learn the model.
Yeah, look, he was talking a lot about the development and the growth, and that at the end of the day, everybody is responsible not only for their individual growth, but also for the growth of others, and how everybody has a sponsor within the company. So when you switch a little bit your mindset from, let's say, bigger title mindset to a learning mindset, and you're like, look, I'm here on a learning journey. Here are the steps I'm going to take.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just a different view. It's a different approach, and it feels like it's working for them. A lot of companies are trying to get there. It won't work everywhere, right? Because you still have people from the old status quo. You still have people who are coming out of the university with a specific roadmap in their head. But hey, you see, sometimes it works.
Yeah, and it's hard to change the motion as well, because when everybody in the company understands that culture, practically everybody, somebody new comes in, they just go along, right? Whereas changing a whole way the company works is a whole different story.
Yeah, so I'm very glad, Daniel, that you invited Ralf, and we had this conversation about a big company in a completely different way than we're used to.
Yes, so am I. And we'll have a lot of more of these great conversations this year. So stay tuned, and we'd love to hear from you. So if there's any feedback that you have, please let us know. You know where to find us. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guides.